Perfect. All right, we are live. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to another edition of the Wild and Precious Optimal Living Show with your hosts, me, Dr. Sam, and Dr. Lynn.
Dr. Lynn.
So we want to thank everybody for joining in today. And as always, our show is sponsored by our practice, Wild and Precious Optimal Living. So if you are a family in the Denver area who has a child who is struggling with something like ADHD, sensory processing, or even autism, then we invite you to take a look at our practice. If you're looking for alternatives to the pharmaceutical route, if you have a child that's struggling and you're looking for answers, you're looking for solutions, and you're looking for hope, then I invite you to take a look. Come find out what it is that we're doing, and let's see if we can help your child start to reach their optimal health potential. So I'm going to let Dr. Lynn take over the reins from here to introduce our wonderful guest today. I'm very excited for this one.
Yes, absolutely. So for those of you who's tuning in to our show for the first time, we're really focused on increasing your resilience by bringing in resources to help increase your brain, your body, and your emotional health. And today, I'm really excited to be able to have Dr. Patrick Porter, the creator of BrainTap, here with us on the show. And so just a little back-end story for those of you who've never heard of BrainTap before, and Dr. Porter will absolutely go in and talk a little bit more about it, but it is a light sound therapy device. And how we came across this was both Dr. Sam and I, when we, I think it was in 2016, 2017, our son was just 1 month old. We moved back from Texas all the way back to Colorado, sleep-deprived parents getting ready to launch our practice, and I think at that time of our lives we were just pretty much in survival mode and just zombies as we were trying to navigate new parenthood and entrepreneurship and being new practitioners as well too. So it was a lot. And a colleague of ours introduced us to BrainTap, and long story short, it was amazing in terms of using it personally. The device that Dr. Sam is wearing right now is the light and sound device that we were utilizing first personally, and after each session I felt more grounded, more centered. And as a mom that was waking up in the middle of the night, I didn't drink coffee, I didn't rely on caffeine, and really my go-to was BrainTap. And for me, it was profound in a sense too, because of my background in facilitating, leading meditation and yoga, and realizing that there is something very powerful about this device. And then, so lo and behold, reached out to Dr. Porter, and pretty much I think I'm like a fangirl, I would describe, and just, really love Dr. Porter and his team's work, and all the different strides too. And
I want to add something to it too in that journey and when we got started, because this thing literally changed our life. Anybody who's been an entrepreneur and started a business knows it's 25-hour days, 8 days a week. You are on the go all the time trying to get things done. And like I said, then we decided to up the ante and have a child at the same time. So, a child who's less than 6 months old, who's not sleeping well, who's keeping us up at nighttime and everything. We're left at wit's end. And it was crazy because you get to the point where you're so tired you can't even sleep. Like, you can't even nap. You're exhausted and burnt out. And after, the crazy thing, after 10, 15 minutes, sometimes even 20 minutes on the device, you're waking up rested and refreshed and ready to go take on another 6 hours or 8 hours, whatever you need to do. So personally, we have just a ton of experience with this thing, and like Lynn said, total fanboy, fangirl for this because it's changed our lives.
Yep. So, obviously we also offer it in our practice as well too. It was a no-brainer after that.
Yeah.
So with that said, we are excited to be able to have Dr. Patrick Porter on. He is the creator and developer of BrainTap, and they have been at this since the 1980s, right, Patrick?
Yes.
And so
not as BrainTap, but we've been doing light and sound therapy.
Light and sound therapy, yeah. And so it's gone through major different evolution since you've started this. And not to mention, he is, an international speaker. You're super excited. He's author of several really phenomenal books, such as Awaken the Genius, Thrive on Overdrive. My personal favorite, because I'm curious about the the guided visualizations that's on BrainTap itself, but Discover the Language of the Mind and Awaken the Flourishing Brain, and along with other things. And not to mention, he's also a professor with Quantum University as well too, which is awesome. So with that said, first question, and just be able to introduce, how you started this in the 1980s, or developing this light and sound therapy, but how did that all inspire you? Where did that all, was that trigger from?
Well, it all started actually with my dad, who was a very gifted alcoholic, and I was a gifted troublemaker. And so while he was getting help with his alcoholism, he found out that he could relax, and when he learned to relax, he didn't need to drink alcohol. So he started teaching courses in something called the Silva method, which was a meditation practice. And when he started teaching us and myself, I realized he tricked us really at first, because he tricked us into doing it for sports. And then, of course, that motivated us. And then after the sports, we started seeing that our grades were going up. And I come from a family of 9 kids. So you'd think with 9 kids, there'd be a lot of alcoholics in the family. We fortunately only have one brother that decided that he was smarter than his genetics. And so he's got the problems that the rest of us don't have, because we all practice these techniques. And then in the 80s, what happened, when I graduated, I started working with a doctor in Phoenix area as his relaxologist. And then I was introduced to Light and Sound Technology, which was a company, and we partnered up, and I became the research person. And then the 6 of us took a big machine. It was called the Sills, a $10,000 unit, and we miniaturized it into a handheld unit that is very different than what we have today, but it's the same technology, but just improved upon today. And they didn't think it would actually sell, but we started selling it. We got in '89, we got an award from the Consumer Electronics Show for the best new gadget of the year. But if you can imagine, this was before cell phones were popular, before CDs weren't even out yet. So I mean, those are long gone. And so people thought we were like from another planet. So for years, we did this through our franchise company. I built a franchise of 108 locations, sold that in 2006. And then in 2013, I came back on the scene with the headset we have now and started the company BrainTap, and working with doctors like yourself. And I know you met through one of the NeuroInfinity events with Dr. Barwell, and my wife met you first, I'm pretty sure. And in that process, we've met so many great people. We have a mission. When I came back to work, people go, "What are you coming back for, doing this?" And because I'd already done it, once, and I thought, well, we better do it again. And I said, well, I want to better 1 billion brains. And now with the technology that's out there, like our cell phones, everybody on Earth has a cell phone. In fact, they say there's more cell phones on Earth than there are people. You can imagine that. So people have more than one cell phone. But it can be a force for good in the world, is what I'm saying. And so we're looking for partners like yourself, like Sam and you. When you're working with people, our goal is to better 1 billion brains together. I can't do that alone. So just like most other things, we need partners in life. And just like you're helping out the community in Denver, they need help, and you've got solutions there to help them.
That's fantastic. Well, my question is, so when you, from your own personal experience, and rather than letting the situation or letting your family struggles get worse, you turned it around, you and your family together, and it sounds like your dad was very innovative in that sense, to be able to explore that, and that willingness to work and develop himself. From that, and then in the 1980s, was there a lot of evidence at that time? Did you, how, you just mentioned before.
If you can imagine, I know you do a lot with neurofeedback as well.
Yeah.
There was no neurofeedback back then, nothing.
Yeah.
They had just come out with a machine called the Mind Mirror, which was the closest thing to neurofeedback, where you could measure the brainwave activities. We used biofeedback back then, hand temperature, respiration rates, things of that nature, which are good indicators for alpha. But we didn't know we could get people into the deeper states called theta. When we started using light, we were actually using sound first, and then when the LED came out. So this is all new technology. Like heart rate variability was just being put on the scene with the Russians and showing how that works with the body and all of that. So we were really looked at like, what are you talking about? Why would I do that? I'm just going to look at a candle and meditate, or whatever. And we're like, well, you're getting something out of it. We couldn't prove it. But luckily today we have a lot of evidence. We have a lot of research going on. In fact, we just had 3 papers published, which is very exciting for us at BrainTap, because we're finally partners with universities. Like in India, we have 5 major university partnerships. We have partnerships in Brazil, partnerships in America. Duke University is actually 1% owner of our company. There in Colorado, where you're at, the Wabi company, which is up in Boulder, we're really good partners with them because they measure brain activity a lot. And they contacted us because they found out that their people were getting 125% improvement in brain function, the doctors that were using BrainTap. And I mean, they're still getting good results the other way, but they were accelerating those results. And we found that to be true too at the Neurolife Center in Atlanta, where they use it for concussions as well. So we're really getting into concussion care now. It's kind of all evolved from one thing to the next because of practitioners like yourself who start working with your community, and you find out, wow, when you get the brain functioning right, the body seems to function right, and it works well with chiropractic because we're talking about the same thing, the nervous system, and getting those, Hebb's law states those neurons that fire together wire together. Mm-hmm. And so when a chiropractor does the adjustment, they're getting the hardware set up, and then we can work with the software of the mind and get the mind-body connection happening.
That's fantastic. So really, what is the magic behind, the results that you're seeing that is really just blowing the minds of all these different partnerships that you're having in these universities and different researchers around the world?
Well, the biggest thing is everything in our universe is synchronized. A lot of people think about that and they might not believe it, but I'm going to challenge every listener to go to YouTube, put in synchronized metronomes. And you can see there's one there where they have 200 metronomes, and they start them all at different times, and within 3 minutes, those metronomes are all synced. That's the same thing with our hemispheres in our brain. If we're given the right stimulus to synchronize to. This usually happens in a state of alpha, and then it'll happen again in a state of theta, 10 hertz and 7.8 hertz frequency. So now we're able to prove that. And what happens there when these hemispheres are not balanced, for instance, another chiropractor down in Florida, his name is Dr. Kelly Miller, he wrote a book called Saving Your Brain. And we did a research project with him where we did a BrainTap study for 6 weeks. These were, it was just a pilot study, 5 people. They all were on dementia scale. The medical doctors diagnosed them. They took the test. They had the brain scans. One thing we found was their hemispheres were not synchronized. Well, within 6 weeks, after doing BrainTap 3 times a day, they not only had synchronized brains, the doctors said, if you would have came to me with this same statistics, I would have not have diagnosed you. But I can't not diagnose you because we already have the diagnosis. And so what we showed was now we can actually measure neuroplasticity, which means how the brain wires and fires. These are, we're voltage. In fact, the reality is that every one of us is a photic being. We're light beings. It's not esoteric anymore. Right now, as we're sitting here speaking, our DNA is actually broadcasting every 40 seconds a light pulse to the rest of our body system. The cell is receiving light and transmitting light. Every one of them, unless it's going through apoptosis, which is cell death. So what we do, one of the reasons we get the brain synchronization, all of these wonderful symptoms removing, is because we're giving the body the most underprescribed nutrient on earth. That's light. In Colorado, you guys are pretty gifted or pretty lucky, I should say, because you got a lot of light there. Mm-hmm. But if you're in a New York City or, you're living up north, you're not going to get the sunlight you need. And our body processes that, like things like vitamin D are actually hormones, but they call them vitamins. And so, but it's produced really in our body from light. But every function of our body has a light component. Mm-hmm. So what we're doing is we're using light, sound, and vibration in a way that is in harmony with our body. So a lot of people call this, quote, biohacking, which can be a positive and a negative term, but we like to call it a health hack because it's a way to be healthy. If we could, we'd all go to the mountains, like near you, go to the Rocky Mountains. When you're in the mountains, and a lot of the people there probably love going to the mountains, well, that's because in the mountains, it's 7.8 hertz frequency. That happens to be theta. Your brain actually begins to trigger the gut to produce more GABA, which is one of the problems we have in America right now is 2/3 of America isn't sleeping. And the problem is they're not getting enough theta brainwave activity and they're not producing GABA. Because when you're in those brainwave states, that's when your brain produces these different neurotransmitters. So we're gonna imitate a cycle of sleep. Most people wouldn't argue with you that if you told them, when you have a great night's sleep, do you feel like Superman or Superwoman? You're like a superhero. But if you have a bad night's sleep, it's like somebody slipped kryptonite in your pocket, and you can't function. So one of the things we find with Brain Tap, I think, is we get people to basically have better quality of sleep, more energy, they have greater clarity in their life, and they just start improving because the overall it's a generalized feeling, very similar to a chiropractic adjustment. When you have, the chiropractor does the adjustment and the body resets itself because the body has an innate intelligence. And this innate intelligence takes over, but the conditions have to be right. So your listeners kind of think of Michelangelo when they asked him, how did you create David? The big statue. He said, I didn't create David. It was already created. All I did was knock all the extra plaster off. That's kind of what we're doing with Brain Tap. In the process is we're getting the body back to its natural rhythms and synchronization. And the body knows how to do this if we get the stress out of the way. But chronic low-level stress is exacerbating the problems.
Most definitely. And I love a lot of the stuff you just said because it's a lot of things we're doing in the practice. I mean, one of the big foundational pieces we work with is functional disconnection in the brain and really addressing that and getting the brain synchronized again. Because as you talked about, it's almost like two dancers that are trying to dance in sync and in rhythm. And if they're out of rhythm, well, then they can't dance and it becomes this choppy, just real lethargic or real just crazy motion versus it being smooth and coordinated. And the whole piece on light. So one of the things we've done a lot with in our practice is using laser therapy because, like you said, our whole bodies are light beings. Every cell in our body has chromophores, which for those that don't know, chromophores are the pieces of the cell that absorb light. And we are light deficient. We need those things. I just want to share a little story because I remember talking about sleep and setting the sleep cycles. We were at a show here in Denver and had a gentleman come up. It was towards the end of the show. And he said he'd been looking at our booth the entire 2 or 3 days, and he said, I've had insomnia for 14 years. He's like, I've not had a good night's sleep in over a decade. He's like, I can't sleep, I can't do anything. I put him on the sleep protocol in here. I think it was sleep number 1. Within 5 minutes he was out. In a bright room filled with people, he was asleep. And I'm like, you can't argue with this technology and how powerful it is.
Yeah, that's one of the things we find at seminars, if we ever get back to going to them, is that people will find that people, even in hotel rooms, even away from home, will have one of their best night's sleep. We tracked it once at a Master Circle, which is a chiropractic group event, where we did pre and post scans of the people that said they didn't sleep well. And we had a 90% improvement, even in a hotel room, even when they're traveling from out of town. Because we can make our own environment when we're, some people can just do this naturally, they don't get affected, their nervous system is able to regulate. But most people, because they get stuck, it's almost like you're stuck in second gear. You want to get in third gear, but you're stuck in that gear. So we call Brain Tap frequency switching technology because we're going to teach the brain to do that dance. We use that analogy too, by the way.
Yeah.
I like the way you said that. I'll probably borrow that from you.
Absolutely.
When I'm speaking.
Yeah. So for, in general, with the technology piece too, you pair these in everyday life after you listen to a Brain Tap session or after you listen, how does the brain start to adapt on its own over time without the usage of Brain Tap?
Yeah. Well, what happens is it's kind of like mathematics. Once you learn how to add 2 plus 2, you don't have to go back to your math teacher. So you start to learn it's a skill set that you learn. Now, unless you do something about the stressors and the toxins and the thoughts, right, you're going to go back to where you were. So the idea of it's not a one-time fix-all, but you can learn this and use your own practice. You could do breathing techniques, you can do meditation. Some people even do walking meditations. But you have to do something every day even if it's right before bed. A lot of people, by the way, don't go to sleep correctly. They think, I hit the pillow, I'm asleep. That's probably one of the worst things you can do because our body's like a capacitor in an electronic circuit. It holds a charge. And if that charge doesn't get discharged, which we used to walk on the ground and discharge it into the earth, and and there's actual physical voltage. We can measure people pre and post with this charge. But when you're laying in bed, if you even just do some breathing exercises, kind of do what they call body scanning, get the stress out of your body, even just take 5 or 10 minutes before you do that, that would make such a big difference because in the morning when you wake up, your body doesn't have to do all that, let's say, labor-intensive work before you get into those deep sleep cycles, and you wake up rested. you know, if somebody's out there listening and they wake up with clenched teeth, or some people wake up and their hands are in a ball, you know, like they've been fighting all night, you know, that means that kinetic energy, which we built, nobody's immune to that. I mean, if somebody tells you they don't get angry, they better start getting angry, because heart rate variability means you can get angry, but then you can relax. You know, I love Paramahansa Yogananda in his book Autobiography of a Yogi says we should be more like children. When we get angry and then get over it. So what happens is the kid's over there playing in the floor, but the parents are still arguing about why the kid was angry an hour ago. You know, so we just need to get over things instead of, you know, it's natural to get upset about certain things. Now, of course, we would never get upset if we were pulled over by a police officer. But then when we get home, God forbid somebody break a plate or something happen, now we're gonna unleash it on somebody who loves us, who's gonna take us back. So we want to be able to discharge in a healthy way. Some people do this through exercise, proper nutrition, but if you can also do it through a practice like a brain tap or a meditation, it's a real positive.
So with that said, how does a brain tap session compare with, you know, traditional meditation? And there's so many different forms of meditation itself, but you know, what brings in a different experience, especially perhaps for a meditator that's had so many years of experience, that, you know, what is that experience how is that experience different then?
Well, the biggest difference for them is they can take their practice a little bit deeper. Mm-hmm. We've never seen, in the history of time since we've had devices to measure it, mm-hmm. we've never had a meditator beat brain tap in neurofunction. Even people that consider themselves gurus that we've measured in India. Mm-hmm. When they got on brain tap, they went much deeper, they got much more neurological change. And what we found in people that aren't seasoned meditators, which is about 80% of the people that say they meditate, is they actually stress out the brain when they go to relax. Because they're thinking, I'm thinking too much, I'm not breathing right, I'm not sitting right, I don't have my posture right. And so that conscious mind, what might be called the monkey mind, it gets in the way. And with brain tap, you don't have to worry about that. You can actually be thinking about other things. And this is one of the things we usually would do, like at a neuroinfinity event like you went to. We'd put somebody in the front of the room, hook them up to the neuroinfinity, and have them do a brain tap session live. And while we're doing the class, people are watching their brain change. And the guy sitting in the chair, or girl, gets up afterwards and go, I heard everything, I didn't think anything happened. And they're all laughing because the brain still made the changes. Because that's what you're talking about, how powerful the technology is. Your brain loves to follow frequencies. The brain loves patterns. So even if you're doing a Jyoti meditation, which means a candle meditation, for those that don't know about it, that candle is flickering at 10 hertz frequency. That's why you relax, why you do the candle meditation. It's just an old form of LED, let's say. You know, it's their technology of the time. Some people go to drum circles. If you've never been to a drum circle, I recommend you do it just to go there and have the experience, because the drum circles will synchronize. Pretty soon it's like chaotic music, but then eventually, wow, it all and then people just get into this rhythm and this cadence. Dance too. If you go to a dance hall, people start dancing and it looks all chaotic at first, but then it'll start to level out, because we live in a synchronized universe. And so we're using what we do anyway. What our system is designed to be synchronistic, in harmony with its environment. If not, then we usually are repelled from that environment. That's why some people can walk into an environment and they go, I got the willies or something. You know, when they walked in there, because our body knows. We're controlled by more than our physical senses. We have all these frequencies and fields around us, like our heart field. We can actually measure it up to 4 feet away, but now they have devices that can actually measure heart rate variability from up to 18 feet away from a person. So science now knows that we're not contained to our physical form, that we extend far beyond this physical nature. Think of the brain waves a little bit, Lynn and Sam, like Wi-Fi's, but they're good for you. You know, right. And we have, in these Wi-Fi systems are telling the body what to do. Just like the light system, the chromophore, like you're talking about, all the cells are looking for these. We have these receptors in our body for all these different things. Some come in the form of, light. In fact, they're now saying that on our summit, we had John Amaral, who's a chiropractor, but he's also was on Goop, Gwyneth Paltrow's show, which is really cool. You should tune into that show if you get Netflix. Mm-hmm. And when you talk about the dura and the systems of the body that go through the body, mm-hmm. they're now saying that we transmit information through this system of the body through light. Mm-hmm. And it's faster than the nervous system. So that's why when you get a massage, you get a chiropractic adjustment, it actually reorganizes this higher order of thinking, if you will, of the body, or this technology of the body that we have. that has us function in our everyday life.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So I want to ask just a real basic question, because some of the people listening they've never heard of brain tap. They're hearing all these amazing things. So how does it work? What are the technologies that are in here? Because for those, they're just looking at a headset. Well, what's so special about it?
Yeah, well, the big thing, we start with retinal flashing. That's what makes us different. Retinal flashing means that we have your eyes are closed. You could look at it with your eyes open, it won't hurt you. It's 470 nanometer light, and so it actually will cause blood flow, circulation, all the positive things that a laser would do, but in a lesser, because it's LED, and it's low level light. So that is actually attracting brain function. The eyes aren't just attached to the brain, the eyes are brain matter. So photobiomodulation means that they did this with a laser, not with our device, but on YouTube too, you can see a Harvard doctor puts a laser on somebody, and it actually, they can trace that light throughout the whole body. Yep. So even though they might be putting it on the finger, something called photobiomodulation, the red blood cells actually absorb the light, and then that light gets carried throughout the body. When that light finds a cell that's going through apoptosis or cell death, it then attracts that photon, that energy, into the cell. At that moment, the cell restarts. And something called vasodilation, blood flow, circulation, nitric oxide, all these wonderful things that happen with light, the body gets energy. But the main thing it gets is something called ATP, which is the currency of the body. So we're gonna give the energy that the brain needs to heal itself. Because the worst thing that happens is you do these things and you don't have the energy to heal. So we need that light. Now we're gonna also put it in through the ears. People look, now just a minute, with the light, most of your listeners have probably been to a conference where they were listening to the lecture but they couldn't hear them, and then they had to adjust their vision, and as soon as that person's in line of sight, now they could hear them. That's because your eyes actually are 30% of your vision. Of your hearing. So your vision is not just for sight, it's for sound. And it's part of our ancient brain, because what happens in our primitive times, of course, we're walking through the wilderness, we want to make sure we can see and hear what we're about to step on, so we don't step on a snake or something like that. So, or the animals that are around in our look. We also did the ears because there's something called meridians. It's very popular in other cultures or in natural medicine. But it's becoming more and more popular now with mainstream medicine because they know we're energy systems. But all the energy systems, the body is holographic in nature. So you can do it through the eyes or through the ears and all these different, or the feet or the hands. But we chose the ears because the blood from the ears go from the ears to the brain. So we can blood dose. So again, blood throughout the rest of the body takes about 45 seconds to go through the body. But through the ears, it could be 3 to 5 minutes. So imagine you have all that blood in the ears. If you've ever cut your ear, you know how long it takes to get it to stop, because there's a lot of pressure built up there. So that light is being dosed. All those cells are being bathed in that light, and then they're going throughout the whole body through the meridian points. And we can actually measure when those meridians open up or if they're clogged. So if somebody feels warmth in the ears, there's no heat being generated by the brain tap. That's photic energy. And the body is absorbing those photons. As soon as there's that blockage is released, they won't feel that heat anymore. But the whole thing is about getting light into the body as much as we can, and first into the brain. So light is very important. Now that light is also flickering at a frequency that's meant to heal the body, to turn off what's called sympathetic overload and turn on parasympathetic. So, which we know most chiropractors know about, but the listeners, what I tell the average person, I say, we turn off that survivor brain and we turn on the healing brain. Because you can't do both at the same time, unfortunately. If you're in fight or flight and you're running away from a saber-toothed tiger, it doesn't matter if you took the world's greatest nutrients. It's not going to be digested. Right. So what we did then, we use sound frequencies. Now, we can do this all with sound. So you can do it all with light, you can do it all with sound. They're both really good sciences. What we decided to do is put them both together. So what's happening in the right eye is actually happening in the left ear, and vice versa. So we can get this symmetry again, get the body working. These tones, they're called binaural beats and isochronic tones. They're designed to balance the brain through frequencies and sound. And you don't really hear them, but it's working because we can measure it, something called a cortical response, at the deep regions of the brain. And we trigger all the different frequencies that are needed. We trigger what's called the master brainwave, which is that's what the whole training's about. So when somebody's coming through, maybe we'll get a chance to talk about the brainwaves. But then what we do, so we have the sound, we also layer in music. Back in the 70s, there was a lot of research out called the Mozart effect. Most people don't know about this because it's kind of lost in translation now. They just know if you listen to classical music, there's a lot about babies, right? Play classical music to your baby and they'll be smarter. They had Mozart babies and all this. And that's because when you listen to this type of music, your brain actually synchronizes into alpha. And so we use that music to keep an alpha trigger. That's kind of a carrier wave on all BrainTap sessions, because you have to, if you can keep that 10 cycle going, that opens up a gamma burst. What gamma is to the brain is like a bass drum to a band. Gamma beats 40 times a second at the minimum, and it's kind of it's the orchestra leader. It keeps everything else working. So you get a gamma burst when you're doing a 10 cycle rhythm. That's what happens in all meditations, by the way. So if you're meditating correctly, that's why when they're measuring the Buddhist priest up in Wisconsin, and they're saying, wow, they had 35% gamma. Well, they were actually in alpha, but they were generating gamma brainwaves, because you don't just generate one. It's kind of like what they call a tuning fork, where you hit a tuning fork and then the other frequencies all build up. Now, what we did on top of that, which Dr. Lim talked about a little bit ago, was we also use words. We're going to use positive psychology. And the reason for that is we now know through people's work like Dr. Bruce Lipton that we can change up to 2,300 different gene expressions by the words we choose. And the listeners, I said that right. We can change the gene expression. What that means is your genes, you are not fixed in space. In fact, you're not even the same person that started this interview with me. Your gene expression is changed just by listening to this podcast or this radio show. So as you think about it, that's changing all the time. It changes with the people you hang out with, the food you consume, the thoughts you think, everything you do. Not only do we have an adaptive nervous system, we have a dynamic biology that we function, and it all starts with your thoughts. So if you can get your thoughts right, you get your nutrition right, you move. The biggest thing I tell people is, besides BrainTap, is move and breathe. You have to move and breathe. That's why we really support yoga, Tai Chi, those kind of things, or dance. Just get out and dance. Do something. Get your body moving.
Yeah. So with that too, I mean, there's like so many different questions that I have.
So I want to recap everything you said, because
okay.
it was a lot. So you have the light coming through the eyes. You have the light on the ears. You've got the isochronic tones and the binaural beats, and then you have the positive words you said, which is usually in the programs is like a guided meditation, right? So all that comes synergistically together to create, I don't know if you guys came up with this term, I love it though, that brain frequency following response, correct?
Yeah, we didn't create that. That's actually a body of science.
Okay.
Harmonics is a big science right now, because every computer chip, they have to worry about harmonics because of all the quote noise that's happening inside the system, so they have to work on those things.
Very interesting. Okay. So all that's coming together to create this brain frequency following response, which then you talk about, you get these amazing results, whether it's taking somebody from that real vigilant, aggressive survival brain down to that calm and relaxed state and everything in between, as we talk about a lot with people. But I just wanted to recap for everybody following along. This is how the technology works, and the magic.
And every one of our Sam, every one of our sessions are different for different reasons. Like if somebody has dementia issues, then we have sessions that increase the SMR brain frequency. If it's autism, then we have alpha training, because we find the autistic brain unfortunately doesn't have a lot of alpha, if any, and then they can't process and they can't speak, because we need alpha. That's one of those Wi-Fi programs I was talking about. If you don't have that, you can't tell the rest of the body what to do. So it's very specific each session what we do, but the listener doesn't really need to know that. They just get the experience. But for this conversation, I just wanted to reinforce that.
Absolutely.
Well, one question that ties back into is, you mentioned that there's different specific conditions that BrainTap can be utilized for, from dementia to autism to maybe even Lyme's disease or chronic fatigue. My question is, because in our office we are looking at from developmental functional neurology, which is looking at any deficits from the brainstem all the way up to the cortex, and then from side to side, such as right side of the brain being stronger than the left side and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, as we're doing deeper studies here, and I'm always a student, forever a student, knowing that, for instance, for the left side of the brain, it's triggered by like more electronic music is that you're listening to through the right ear to stimulate the left cortex, and then listening to classical music to stimulate the right brain. And this is probably a little bit too much more for the listener, but more from personal curiosity. How is the music chosen, or is there any specific for BrainTap right now? Is there any specific process to stimulate like a particular side of the brain?
Yeah, in the neurofeedback package, we have over 200 sessions. We have one called New Mind.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we found out with Dr. Kelly Miller, was that the hemispheres were not synchronized.
Mm-hmm.
The left hemisphere slowed down before the right. So we developed sessions. When you go into that, now it's not available to the everyday user, but for you doctors out there, it is. And so what it is it'll tell you the frequencies that we're training to for the right and left at the same time. They'll listen to it, and it'll tell you this is what the right brain's going to get, this is what the left brain's going to get. We developed some of those. And we did that based on his research. But if you find some things you want to do, one of the nice things about BrainTap is that we can create those things, and then we just share them with the other doctors. We have over 2,300 clinics now, and most of them are functional medicine doctors, and they're doing some form of neurofeedback along with it. So they get to measure the brain to find out what's happening, and then we get that feedback from those offices. So thousands of sessions every week that we get to learn from what's working, what isn't working. So Dr. Miller is getting really good results with the Saving Your Brain protocols. We call it the New Mind in BrainTap. So when you go to that bundle, you'll see them.
I gotta say, one of the most...
The reason we call it New Mind is it seems like they've lost their mind. And for the listeners, if your hemispheres aren't synchronized, when you think a thought, everybody thinks you just have a filing cabinet back there and you just go back and grab it and you're good to go. But you could light up to 8 different areas of the brain or more just to get one memory. So if it's not synchronized across the hippocampus, which is the part of our brain that takes short-term memory and makes long-term memories, and then also puts it all together. That's like the assembler. And if that part has been damaged, or if it's atrophy, stress will atrophy the brain. So, and also alcohol and a lot of other bad things. But we want to keep that. Also, lack of use. I mean, if people are just sitting around watching television all day, never stimulating their brain, moving, actually, if you don't move and breathe and exercise, your brain will shrink. Because that's why we have such big brains as humans, is because we started standing up and moving, and going after things. So we want to keep doing that to keep our brain functioning correct.
Yeah, that's something we talk a lot about with people, and it's like Dr. Lynn was saying, in the developmental functional neurology world, it's the brain grows through movement. Like our frontal lobe, which is our executive center of the brain, grows out of the motor center. So you have to move to grow the humanity side of your brain. I just want to ask, because this blows me away every time a kid uses BrainTap, because I always think like there's no way this kid is gonna sit here and do this. And when I say kid, I mean someone who's younger than 10, 7-year-old, 5-year-old. I think the youngest we've had it is our son Rivers, who's 3, and he's done BrainTap. And I'm blown away that they will sit there and listen to it. How do they do that? How do you get a kid to sit still and actually listen to it?
Well, by nature, we want to feel good, right? And when the brain is out of sync, when you don't have that balance of brain waves, the balance of beta alpha when you're awake or alpha theta when you're in meditation, you don't feel good. Basically, so the brain loves patterns. And Joquita Handy, Dr. Handy out of Orange County, she's the one who called me about with the autism. We didn't even know it would work with that. And she said, I just have to put it on these kids that are stimming. And stimming means that they've made the switch from being in high beta, and they're not able to get back to the alpha frequency. So all this energy has no place to go. So think of it like there's no way for this energy to ground. So they're just going crazy. Yep. So she put them on the BrainTap. She said, these parents won't leave until they get a BrainTap to take home, because they've never seen their kid relax. She goes, what is going on? Just like you just did. Yep. I said, well, the brain loves patterns. So once in the patterns, they get sucked into the patterns, because by nature, almost everybody on earth loves sunrises and sunsets. Well, there's a reason for that. there's mystical traditions, though, they have a lot of things around that. But just in the scientific terms, when we get those, there's the light frequencies that are very similar to the light frequencies we chose for brain tap. Because our brain, that's how we reset it. And so they intuitively know. We all have intuitive knowledge. Like, you know, when we were kids, we didn't learn languages the way that you and I have to learn in college. We absorbed a language. And for those people who have learned more than one language, they kept a brain circuit awake, so they can actually learn a third, a fourth, a fifth language easier than someone who only knows one language. So these kids, but we all know the language of patterns. That's what we're looking for. The problem with some of these brains, I should say, not all of them, because you'd have to check them out individually, but if they've been traumatized by something, whether it's something happened to them, or it's a genetic or whatever's going on, then they want to get back to that synchronized state. They intuitively know that's when they're going to feel the best, but they don't know how to get there. So we give them a stimulus, right? So that stimulus gives them the ability to go there without having to consciously try anything. And I'm blown away. Almost every week I get a couple emails from parents saying, my kids are asking to do brain tap. This is the most bizarre thing I've ever heard. Yeah. And because they want to feel good. My kids, when they were growing up, they knew if they did something bad, what I had them do was they had to go do, it wasn't brain tap at the time, it was called the MC Square. I said, go do your light and sound session and figure out 3 ways you'd have done that differently. Because I wanted to teach them that, and they would go in there, and of course I'd go in there, they'd be passed out. And then when they would, but they really were. They were overtired or they were anxious. They had that nervous energy. And then they became very compliant. Not compliant in a way that they just do whatever, but they didn't have all that energy that would make them disruptive to the household. You know, and they knew, hey, and pretty soon, and I'm very lucky, both of my kids are now 38 and 39, and they don't have drug problems, and they know when they get in trouble, they know first thing to do is go do a brain tap session, go figure out a solution. Don't go drink alcohol or go do some drugs to try to figure it out, but figure out a healthy way to do it. And that's what I think we need to teach our kids. Give them solutions. Don't just tell them they're doing something wrong.
Oh, absolutely. Just having strategies and resources to go to, or even just taking a breath. Like that's one thing that we try to do with our kiddo, and it's a practice for ourselves too. It's just when we get caught up with something and it feels overwhelming, it's just got to stop, breathe, and reminding them. So that's really cool. We're gonna try and do that with our kiddo.
I think it's funny because we had a kid in the practice this last week, and he grabbed his mom and his brother and dragged all of them back to the brain tap room and said, "You guys got to do this." So the whole family did brain tap together. It was so awesome. The mom's like, "I've got to get one of these," because she was absolutely loving it. Yeah. So I want to go back real quick to the memory piece, because that's something I did not know about brain tap, that it can help with memory. So I guess personally, again, what programs would you use for that, and then how does it help with the memory centers of the brain? Because that is definitely a big concern, especially for our older clients.
Yeah, we have two different programs for that, and there's others that are in the neurofeedback section too, that are SMR training. Okay. So think about it, it's all about speed. So when we go get a new computer, we don't go, what was last year's model? We want this year's model because there's more connections. So think of neuroplasticity like computer speed. So we want to speed that up. That happens to be a brainwave called SMR. So the encodings in these are geared to encourage that. One we have for the students, we have an accelerated learning program. Now all of the children's programs are for these because that's what they need most. So every child, all of our 43 different children's programs are with that. And then we also have one called Brain Fitness. That's the one we use for the adult learner that might not be going to school, but they still want to improve their memory, their concentration, their focus, getting things done, staying motivated. We have a whole series for that, the Brain Fitness series, and those are the ones that I would recommend. And the nice thing is that as they do these, the brain just starts to incorporate, because we create what's called long-term thinking. Most people that have addiction problems or have bad habits, they have what we call short-term thinking. They're just looking for the immediate gratification. They're not thinking about the results. If they could just interrupt that pattern for a few minutes, then they would not make that bad decision. So that's part of the training process. And with accelerated learning, a little bit differently than that, what we want to do is put it out on the timeline. When would you need this information? So we call it being a quizzer. You start questioning the information, and when you do, it's stored in your brain, questioning a solution. So then when you need it, when you're questioned about it, it's stored in the right way so you can access it. But all the sessions we found will increase your learning. We've done so many studies with learning. Just by getting the brain synchronized and working, it starts to, that's just one of the general side benefits, you'd say, of doing brain tap. That's also a side benefit to doing any meditation, by the way. So, you'll see those improvements.
So, talking, so many different forms of meditation, and I'm personally been working on some and trying to contribute to the library too, which you have a ton in your library, which is really awesome and very supportive for us as practitioners, and many other practitioners are listening out there. Definitely worthwhile to explore. My question is, first of all, I think you build a beautiful bridge between the metaphysical in terms of what, maybe something that science still cannot measure, but then creating this beautiful bridge to what can be measured and the validity behind these different skills or different types of practices. Does it matter what form of meditation? Because in your library you have different forms. There's visual, there's breath work, some guidance on breath work. There's some that are specific to neuro-linguistic programming as well too, and then a mix of even sound meditation. So
yeah, well, the key to neuroplasticity and brain growth is to continuously challenge it. Which means to get it has to be novel, right? To get it to work, it has to be fun, it has to be motivating. So if we can give you many different ways, if you do the same dance all the time, you might like doing a square dance or whatever, but eventually you're going to get bored of it. You want to learn another dance. You want to do, and the same is with the brain. So some people do the same meditation every day. Like I just interviewed with somebody who's been doing TM for 27 years, and she just doesn't feel like she's getting anything out of it. I said, that's because you've done TM for 27 years. Your brain's saying, pretty soon if it becomes, just old hat, and when you do something different, that newness factor, even in, whether it's in, the Christian faith, which is of course my background, they say be in the world but not of it. Buddha says have a new mind, wake up every day with a new mind. What they're saying is, don't keep doing the same thing every day. Look at life like it's Christmas, and there's some things, I always joke, that's why they call it the present. You got to open it up to see what's in it. But if you go with all the preconceived ideas, or you're doing the same technique, or it becomes, I went to school as a Catholic, so you have to imagine every morning we met at church, we did our prayers. I don't remember what I did. I was on autopilot, because I did them so many times. Oh, this is when you kneel, this is when you stand, this is when, and when it becomes like that, that's not the same kind of practice, and even when I went to Wudong, China, and I studied with the priest over there in the temples, we only learned 2 of the forms because I was only there for 2 weeks, and I didn't know, because they brought such newness to each part of it. You were practicing it, that they have a way of knowing how to do that. These are the masters, not just somebody on your corner doing a Tai Chi meditation, and so there's certain way you think about things. So I think we're not trying to be everything to all people, but we do know that when you get the brain synchronized and you feed it light, sound, and vibration, then whatever you want to learn. That's why I'm part of Quantum University. We took the coursework at Quantum University and we made notes of it. So we could take a master's class or a PhD class that might take 4 years. Now they can do it in less than 2. Because they're downloading that information into their mind instead of just trying to learn it all the old-fashioned way. I really believe it's time to upgrade our whole practice of education because it's so outdated. There's so many new technologies to get that, and our brain is much more than what we've been led to believe. We can learn at a much faster rate, but it would be like, kind of upsetting the pharmaceutical industry. They got a lock on it, so you got to kind of play within their rules.
Yeah, we don't have enough time to start talking about the issues in the educational system today. But I do want to ask, because you mentioned the challenging the brain, the novelty, and one of, I'd say, the newer programs that has come out, and I don't know how to describe it beyond just you'll hear your voice talking in one ear, and then there's another script happening in the opposite ear, and this is going on at the same time. What is the purpose of that? Because for some people it drives them absolutely just crazy. Yeah. I'm one of them.
Yes. So if it drives you too crazy, you don't want to listen to it. You want to listen to the single voice version.
Yep.
The dual voice, what that does, once you listen to it, and most people, 95% of our users love it, and the reason is your brain starts to make a message out of the 2. it starts to do what's called time slicing. We think time happens the way the clock tells us. But like Einstein said, if you're around a beautiful woman for an hour, it seems like a minute. If you're sitting in a hot stove for a minute, it seems like an hour. You know, so time is really relevant to what you're doing. What we wanted to do is we again wanted to challenge the brain. If we had you hooked up to your neuroinfinity with whole brain, all the sensors, Q, E, G, let's say, we would show when I talk to your right ear, your left brain lights up. When I talk in your left ear, your right brain lights up. What will happen eventually is after less than 3 minutes, both hemispheres will light up and they won't shut down again. But what happens normally when people meditate is, and this is the sad part, the big difference between what we do in normal meditations, one hemisphere shuts down. Now, it doesn't shut down if you do the breathing exercises and the mudras, and they have all these technologies. The whole thing is really about keeping your whole brain going. But people don't meditate for 15, 20, 30 years to get all that technology working in their body. So we just said, you know what, we don't want you to wait 20 years or have to go to the mountaintop to meditate. We're going to bring the mountaintop to you in your bedroom or your doctor's office, and you can do it very easily. Now, we find that people usually, it's people over 65, so you're aging yourself, Sam, or people under 9. You know, those are the people that usually can't take it because or you're very logical. Like you seem like maybe you really like to read science literature. So if you're Mr. Spock, then so you're trying to figure out, okay, what does that mean? How am I going to do that? And sometimes we have a saying, and it's really a principle of almost all learning: let it happen. Yep. And the word "let" means in no way help or hinder the process. Yeah. You know, it's not about if it was your conscious mind. This is another Bruce Lipton analogy, but we know that you are only controlling 5% of the reality that you live in with your conscious mind. That's your left brain. The 95% is controlled by your subconscious, or let's say the unconscious systems of the body that we're not aware of. You're aware of them, but they're just in a super state. Like we can alter our heart frequency, right? If we get worried, stressed, and anxious, we can alter that the rhythm of our heartbeat. We can alter our brainwave attention. But if we just let go and let it happen, the brain will regulate back to normal. Our brain waves will regulate back to normal. So that's the same thing. So what we're doing is we're challenging it so that when you get back to real life, like to quote real life, which is whatever's happening in this physical world, and then now you were handling all this information. Now handling the information of your daily life seems very simple. And if you get stressed out, we've now trained your brain to stay whole brain, which means the solutions and problems form together instead of separate. We've all been to parties before. We go, gosh, I remember his name. And then we go over, we step away for a minute, go get some chips. Oh, Sam, that was Sam that I was talking to. Then you go back over and then you say, hello, Sam. And then like it was like he was having an epiphany. No, you had the epiphany because you were locked out of that information because of what we call cerebral lock, because of the stress. One hemisphere shut down because of the stressful situation. We want to unlock the brain's full potential, and that's one of the ways we found to do it. We're already doing that, though, by the way, with the underlying neural algorithms that are part of the system. But that's just another layer on top of it that we put in.
Yeah. Well, you know, we have about 7 more minutes.
7 minutes.
And so, you know, for our listeners who've never used BrainTap before, maybe the question is just like, well, where can I get a headset, or how do I access the recordings? Can you tell us a little bit more about the two, you know, the headset with the app and the app by itself, what that's like and how to get access to that?
Well, they need to contact you to get both of those things, but I'll tell them about it.
Yeah.
One is the headset. When you use the headset, you're getting the benefit of light therapy. And so they say, Dr. Cousins said, the most underprescribed nutrient on earth is light. So we need light. And so that's the difference. But together, if you just use the sound part of it, you can use just your earbuds, your phone. In fact, we're in 120 countries because of Quantum University. And so people are using it all over the world because the internet makes it easy. I don't have to ship out, you know, CDs, cassettes, or anything else like that. They can just download it to their device. You could share with them a link. If you have a link, you can share with them. They can try a trial if they want to. They come into your office. That's what we usually recommend, do a demo session. Usually what I like to do, and you've seen this at our shows when we're there, is we don't like to try to sell people it. We like people to experience it. Once they experience it, like you said, like the little gentleman that was at your office who took his family back and said,
Yep.
you got to try this brain tap.
Yep.
What happens is people start to realize they don't even know that they have this capacity. There's an experiment in first year science where they tell you about two frogs, right? The one frog gets put into a pot and slowly starts to boil and doesn't realize that it's going to die, and it just lays there. By the time it wants to get out, it's zapped all its energy, it dies. But if you take that boiling water and you try to throw the frog into it, it'll jump right out.
Yep.
So most people are just in that pot boiling. They don't even know the stress. And when you do the brain tap session, it's like you got out of all that stress for 15, 20 minutes. You go, wow,
Yeah.
you mean I can do this? You can teach me how to do this? And it takes no effort. I mean, the nicest thing people like is, you mean I can come take a nap
Yep.
and I get 30% neurological function back? Are you kidding me? You know, a lot of people don't believe it, but I mean, we've been featured in so many different articles now. Forbes just ran an article about us just recently because they were talking about entrepreneurs need to de-stress during this time because there's a lot of stress going on out there. And we know stress also causes the immune system to compress. You know, and we want to keep that, and that's linked to the nervous system, of course. We want to keep our body functioning at its highest level of activity. Also, stress causes you to secrete more sugar. So when you talk about diabetes and things like that, the stress is more fattening than the chocolate you ate if you're guilty about eating it. You know, so you want to work on all those things. So I think the biggest thing is to come to your clinic, try it out, see what you think. Most people, I would say 95% of the people really like it and love it. So just go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
You know, that's what I would recommend.
Well, thanks so much, Dr. Patrick. You know, Dr. Porter, I mean, the biggest thing is just, thanks for reminding us that we actually always have the tool that people can have access to. And for those who are not local in Denver metro area, of course, the app that Dr. Porter was just talking about was just being able to go to the website, and you can use our, actually we have an affiliate link that you will be able to go to, and it's simply special brain tap
gift.
Thank you very much. Yes. www.specialbraintapgift.com, and there you would be able to access or set up an account for 15 days of going through all the different bundles that's available with BrainTap Pro app, as well as an option for an extra 30 days just for 99 cents. And from there you get to be able to try all the different series or different bundles and access the children's learning, sleeping, waking, de-stress, worry-free, all the great bundles there.
Yeah, so I'm curious, we've talked a lot about the technology currently. Is there anything you can share about what you guys are developing in the future? Because I know you're always innovating, you're always trying to make things better. So is there anything that you can share that you're potentially coming out with that's going to be new?
Well, I can't really share anything that specific about it, but I do know we're doing a lot more with brain health with light. We have a cap now where we're seeing a 30% improvement of blood flow to damaged areas of the brain. It's a cap you wear. And our goal is, in fact, even with Dave Asprey, we were talking with him about this, is that we want to build one of those caps with a brain tap built into it.
Yeah.
We're going to be right there. Sounds amazing.
So I think if we can come up with that, which we have in the works, it's just this, the chaos that we've been thrust into here has caused a lot of things to go on the back burner until we get back to a normal world.
Absolutely, yeah.
Whatever that may look like.
Yeah. Well, we are really grateful for the wealth of knowledge that you've brought to the show today, and for us, I feel like both Sam and I have learned a lot too that we can bring back to educate our own practice members as well too. And any last, what is one of your favorite tips that you'd like to be able to give, to just a stranger as they're feeling stuck in life? What is one tip that you want to give away for our listeners that you want to just share?
Biggest thing is what I mentioned earlier. I tell everybody when I talk is start consciously going to sleep. Lay in bed, honor your body, do a little gratitude to your body because it's doing a lot of work. While you're running around doing all the stressful things you do, your body has to handle all that other stress.
Yeah.
So a little gratitude before you go to bed, practice some deep breathing techniques, and love, appreciate, and honor yourself by doing that.
Love that.
I
I'll
love
give you
that.
one more analogy. We use that all the time. Is sleep should be a lot like landing an airplane, not turning off a light switch.
There you go.
That's a good
So-
one right there.
So we
Thank
explain
you.
a lot. So thank you everybody for joining us today on the Wild and Precious Optimal Living Show.
Mhm.
We want to thank Dr. Patrick Porter for joining us today and sharing all this information about the Brain Tap. And again, if you are a person who's interested in trying out these sessions, go to www.specialbraintapgift.com. Or if you have other questions, please feel free to reach out to our office here at Wild and Precious Optimal Living. And Dr. Lynn, what is the question we'd like to ask to close out the show?
Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?
Thank you.
Thank you.